So then we come into the feminists, and there's two groups of people that investor relations departments and analysts who are the sort of, how should we say, at the coal face of this image production. How would you assess the work that they have been doing over the last decade or so?
Well, the image production business is 50 years old. It started out in the 1960s with Litton Industries and a whole group of California public relations people. And I can still remember the first time I got an annual report of a company in color. As up until then, they'd been these little things that looked like telephone books, you know, with little words you couldn't read and everything else. But suddenly these people came up with pretty pictures of the coal face and of the fancy equipment and of orange-colored hats. And so it really took off from there. And there's no question but that the corporate community has been able to sell its story far more persuasively than the buying community has been able to sell a story of caution.
And I mean, a lot of the investor relations people that I speak to, for example, pride themselves on their integrity and say that they tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Is this true? Do they tell the whole truth?
As we discuss in this book, there really is nothing as comfortable as the truth.
As Pontius Pilate CEO once said.
There are different perspectives within which one looks at the truth. And there are all kinds of different ways of looking at something. I mean, you can look at something as being a collection of bricks and mortar. You can look at something as, in the 1960s, when I was living in going to graduate schools in Boston, that they evaluated things by the number of PhDs you had working for you. And in the modern world, how do you evaluate Facebook? I mean, do you evaluate the number of eyeballs they have, the number of people who are totally disgusted when they look at it? I mean, how do you evaluate it?
How much money does it make?
And so what it is its truth is in the eye of the beholder, and truth is in the eye of the promoter, and the promoter keeps promoting, and if people accept the promotion, they take that that indicator of value. There is no universal indicator of value. Even the very rigorous analysts, and I take, for example, someone who we cite here often, who was a man about my age now living in San Diego named Rappaport, and he talks about cash flow. Well, ultimately, even the rigorous Rappaport has to guess what the cash flow is going to be in the future. He doesn't use the word guess. He has far more scientific words than that. But at the end of the day, there is nothing that is certain. And what you really are betting on is the capacity of a given group of people, usually led by a particular leader, to continually take advantage of the market opportunities that they have and to increase the value of the enterprise. That's what you're betting on.
Well, that's where you come down to the corporate valuation and your sort of broad list of criteria, is that the value means different things from different people. It means, can I sell my stock options next week and clean up?
Yeah.
Or it means that in 10 years' time, will this company be larger, bigger, employing more people and making better things?
Exactly. Well, the problem, of course, with the options has been that it turned out that that was a one-way game. Is they were something that people awarded to themselves. They managed to bully the accounting profession so they didn't cost anything. They managed to bully their directors and said, if it doesn't cost anything, are we not as good as the other managements? They managed to bully the executive compensation consultants. So they all got these awards of options, and no sooner did they get the options than they changed the rules about exercising the options, so you didn't really have to put up cash. And then they changed the rules about having to sell the stock you bought with the options and had the company buy them back. So, you know, all the best devices of man are not removed from the capacity of being finagled.
Well, as you mentioned before, some of the best educated and best paid minds in the country are working on these problems.
But you know, that really is a tragedy. A wonderful man who used to be president of Harvard twice, named Derek Bach, wrote a book about 4 or 5 years ago, and he took those people who, by testing standards, were the most educable people in the country. Notice I don't say the brightest, because I don't think the tests measure brightness. They measure ability to do tests. But over a period of 50 years, the people who go into Wall Street had gone from being rather the stupidest people in the world to, from an academic point of view, rather the brightest people in the world. And I kept looking here and seeing these children of my friends who were really cultured, educated, decent people, all going to work on Wall Street. And the hell of it was that, particularly in terms of the mathematics, the government did not get enough people working for them to be able competently to regulate them. And when things got really bad, like when there was a serious breach of law, the government actually had to hire private sector lawyers to prosecute the government's case because we couldn't attract a high enough level of competency to work in the government.
Well, it's been assumed that working for the government is the last refuge of the incompetent, and we paid them accordingly, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, I suppose.
Well, we always had a naive, or perhaps certainly a sentimental sense that working for the government was a high pursuit. And a lot of very good people I knew would work for the government.
Yes, but not recently?
Not very recently.
Yes, as you said, it's been diverted.
Yeah.
And you really, over the last few years, you mentioned the SEC and their problems with enforcement. Have there been any successes? Did Sarbanes-Oxley, did the requirements on analysts to sort of put some distance, the famous leaky Chinese walls through all of the banks and brokerages, have these had any serious effect, or have the combined IQs of Harvard and Yale and MIT done an end run around them?
I'm afraid that the passage of time has not served the SEC well. I'm one of those people who believes that bureaucratic agencies should be mandatorily dismantled after 30 or 40 years, because the enthusiasm of the people who first start them and the people who are familiar with the reasoning behind the legislation, they get older and they quit and they do something else, and the next generation are more worried about their pension plan and what have you. And the SEC not only got tired, but also got quite corrupt. I mean, in the administration of George W. Bush, he appointed a chairman of the SEC who basically dismantled it. And Christopher Cox, the chairman, called in the heads of the investment banks in New York, and they were talking about the amount of gearing that was going to be permitted an investment bank with its portfolio. And they left that meeting with Cox having assured them that the investment banks should fix their own gearing ratio. And that's a reason why, when you saw 5 years later Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns going broke, they had 33-to-1 gearing. And where did that come from? That came from the SEC, and it came from a thoroughly corrupt attitude of just abandoning the responsibility of supervision.